Have you ever noticed how some people seem to feed off your emotions? Every time you react, they win. Every time you stay calm, they lose control. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to argue, explain, or even cut them off. Why? Because toxic people don't survive on your presence. They survive on your reaction, your energy, your chaos, the real strength. It's not in yelling louder. It's not in proving your point. It's in becoming so calm, so grounded, that no storm can reach you. Imagine being like a mountain in a thunderstorm, unmoved, unshaken, untouchable. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." That's not just philosophy. That's a survival skill. And today, we're not here to talk about just dealing with toxic people. We're here to talk about becoming immune to them, not by slamming the door shut on them, but by locking the gate to your mind. Let's get real. Here's a hard truth most people avoid. Toxic people aren't your biggest problem. Your reaction to them is, you can quit your job. You can block that friend. You can move to a new city. You can even go no contact with your own blood. But here's what nobody tells you. You can't run from what you haven't mastered. You can change your surroundings 10 times, but if your emotional immune system is still weak, it won't matter. Someone new will trigger you the same way. And that's where most people stay stuck, thinking that changing the outside will magically fix what's broken inside. But it never works like that. Epictetus, another Stoic legend, nailed it. It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about those things. Think about that for a second. Toxic people only have as much power as you're willing to give them. Their real weapon. It's not their words, it's your reaction to their words. They don't win because they're smarter. They win because you haven't yet trained your mind to be stronger. So let me give you a real-world example. Let's say you've got a colleague, let's call her Karen. Every meeting without fail, she slips in these sly little jabs. She smirks and says something like, "Well, some of us actually double-check our reports." You know she's talking about you. You feel it in your gut. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. You want to call her out right there. You want to snap. But here's where everything changes. You don't. You pause. You take a breath. You look her in the eyes, not with rage, but with stillness. You keep your voice steady, your body relaxed, and you continue speaking with clarity and confidence. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's emotional discipline. That's Stoicism alive and breathing. And guess what happens? She escalates. She throws sharper jabs. She raises her voice because your calmness exposes her chaos. You see, people like Karen, they don't want resolution. They want attention. And when you stop reacting, you stop giving them an audience. This is why it matters. Most people live like emotional puppets tied to the strings of anyone who knows how to push their buttons. One sarcastic comment ruins their entire day. One toxic text spins them into hours of overthinking. One manipulative guilt trip makes them question their worth. But the Stoics taught something powerful, something radical. No one can control your mind unless you give them permission. And that's when everything shifts, when you stop handing people power they were never meant to hold. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to defend your character, your values, or your peace. You don't need to win the argument because winning isn't the goal. What is the goal? Discipline. The kind of discipline that holds you steady when someone's trying to throw you off balance. The discipline to stay calm when provoked, to choose peace over petty drama, and to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. So here's the takeaway. The smartest way to deal with toxic people isn't by confronting them. It's not by out-arguing or proving them wrong. It's by starving them. Starving them of your attention. Starving them of your reactions. Starving them of the emotional fuel they feed on. Because they survive in your overthinking. They grow stronger when you chase closure, seek their approval, or need their validation. But when you cut the emotional supply, they shrink. They vanish. Mental strength doesn't need to scream. It doesn't stomp its feet or prove a point. True strength is quiet. It's being able to sit still in a room full of noise and not flinch. It's letting someone's chaos swirl around you without letting it enter you. You don't need to fix them. You don't even need to fight them. All you need is to limit their access to your mind, your heart, your peace. And that starts with how you respond, or better yet, how you don't. Because the moment you stop reacting, you stop bleeding power. And that's the moment you become dangerous in the best possible way. Let's get one thing straight. Toxic people aren't powerful. They don't hold some hidden weapon. They're not master manipulators because they're smarter than you. They just have something you haven't developed yet. Practice. They've been doing this for years. They've studied emotional manipulation the way an athlete studies the game. They know which tones create guilt, which silences make you anxious, which words trigger your insecurities. They don't need to plan it. It's muscle memory now. It's automatic. And you're not weak, you're just untrained. This is emotional combat, and you've been walking into the ring with no training, no gloves, no guard. Imagine stepping into a boxing match with a professional fighter. You're going to get hit. Not because they're cruel, but because you never learned how to block. You never learned when to duck, when to move, when to strike, or when to stand still. It's the same with toxic people. You're entering emotional warfare without armor, without awareness, without a plan, and then wondering why you're getting hurt. But the Stoics, they didn't blame the opponent. They trained for the battle. Marcus Aurelius said it best: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. If a single comment ruins your whole mood, if one text message can derail your day, then the real issue isn't them, it's your lack of emotional discipline. Now here's something you've probably experienced before, and maybe didn't even realize. Ever notice how toxic people do the same things again and again? You forgive them, they do it again. You explain yourself, they twist your words again. You open up, they use your vulnerability against you again. That's not just coincidence. It's not poor communication. It's not just how they are. It's a pattern. It's a program. It's deliberate, even if it's unconscious. And eventually it clicks, not because they changed, but because you stopped playing by their rules. You've been trying everything, explaining yourself, arguing your side, avoiding conflict, overanalyzing every conversation. You test new strategies like trial and error, hoping one of them will finally make things better. But none of it sticks because you're operating from a place of emotional chaos, not clarity. It's like trying to steer a ship in a storm with no compass. Until one day, you just stop. You stop responding. You stop defending. You stop needing to be understood. And that moment changes everything. Because that's the shift, the quiet shift from prey to presence. You stop playing their game and begin creating your own rules. You stop dancing to their tune and instead start writing your own rhythm. You begin to train your mind not like a victim, but like a warrior. Ask any elite athlete, any military commander, or anyone who performs at the highest level. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's trained, it's earned, it's built through discipline, and emotional strength is no different. You don't build emotional immunity by reading a quote and calling it a day. You don't build it by watching a motivational video and feeling inspired for 5 minutes. You build it when someone tries to provoke you and you stay grounded. You build it in those moments where you want to lash out but choose to breathe instead. You build it when you're disrespected and respond with stillness, not spite. That is self-mastery. That is emotional intelligence stripped down to its rawest, purest form. And don't mistake this for softness. This isn't passive. This level of calm, this depth of discipline is terrifying to those who thrive on chaos. Because when you stop reacting, they lose control. And when they lose control over you, they lose their illusion of power. Here's the truth: the toxic person in your life was never truly powerful. They've simply practiced their dysfunction longer than you practiced your discipline. But once you make the decision to train to take back control of your reactions, to protect your peace like a fortress, to put your inner world above their drama, you become untouchable. You're not fragile, you're just untrained. And the training, it begins today. Let's be real, every emotional outburst, every reactive moment is a crack in your armor. Every time someone pulls anger or sadness or panic out of you, they're not pulling your truth, they're pulling your power. You're not expressing your authenticity, you're abandoning your center. And in that moment, you're handing over the remote control of your emotions to someone who doesn't even respect your peace. Epictetus said it with brutal clarity: any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Now let's clear up a myth. A lot of people believe that not reacting means you're being weak. That if you don't yell back, if you don't defend yourself, if you don't prove your point, you're a doormat. Wrong. Reacting isn't strength. Reacting is a reflex. And reflexes aren't strength, they're conditioning. Real power, real clarity. It comes from choice. The Stoic mindset isn't passive, it's intentional. It's not about letting people walk over you. It's about choosing when, how, and if you respond at all. It's about choosing reason over reaction, logic over emotion, purpose over impulse. That's what mental strength really looks like. That's the mark of a high-performance mindset, not getting dragged into every battle, but knowing which ones are worth your breath. And that's when the real test begins, when life hands you the bait and you choose not to bite. Let's make it practical. Imagine this: you've had a long, draining day. You walk in the door hoping for just a moment of peace, but your partner with a sharp tone and a passive-aggressive glance says, "Must be nice." Only thinking about yourself. The old version of you, you'd snap back instantly. Your voice would rise. You'd drag up old fights from weeks or even months ago. And just like that, hours would be gone, burned in the fire of defensiveness and pride. But the trained version of you, the version that's been sharpening your emotional discipline, that version pauses. You don't react on instinct. Instead, you ask yourself a simple question: what outcome do I actually want from this piece or proof? And then instead of launching into battle, you take a breath and say calmly, "Let's talk when we're both ready to actually listen." No shouting, no emotional war, just quiet, grounded strength. That's not weakness. That's not avoidance. That's strategy. That's executive level emotional intelligence. But why do we react in the first place? That's what most people never stop to examine. It's not because the other person is right. It's because our ego is fragile. We feel insulted and we crave validation. We feel attacked and we scramble to defend. We feel misunderstood and we beg to be seen, to be heard. But if your inner peace is tied to the way others perceive you, you'll always be emotionally bankrupt the moment someone disapproves. Marcus Aurelius offered a powerful reminder: you always own the option of having no opinion. Read that again. You don't have to explain. You don't have to argue. You don't even have to care what they think. That is spiritual discipline. That is self-sovereignty. So here's the truth: every time you react emotionally to a toxic person, you hand them the illusion of control. You give them exactly what they want: chaos. But when you stay calm, not cold, not dismissive, just centered, the dynamic shifts. The game falls apart. Because the moment you stop playing, they lose. Emotional control isn't about bottling things up or pretending you're unaffected. It's about making a choice, choosing what's truly worth your energy. And truthfully, most of what toxic people say doesn't deserve a response. So next time someone tries to drag you into their storm, pause, breathe, master that moment. Because the most dangerous person in the room is never the one who yells the loudest. It's the one who can sit in silence with intention. In a world addicted to noise and constant reaction, silence is often mistaken for weakness. But if you understand power, real grounded power, then you know the strongest presence in any room is usually the one who speaks the least. We've been conditioned to believe silence is surrender. That if you don't clap back, you lost. If you don't explain yourself, they win. If you don't speak up, you're weak. But that's a lie. Silence isn't passive. It's powerful. It's stoic. It's a conscious decision to not pour your energy into the fire of chaos. It's a choice to protect your peace at all costs. Psychologically, silence disarms people who are addicted to drama. Toxic people need a reaction. They thrive on it. They need your words, your justifications, your defenses, because it gives them a script to play. The victim, the misunderstood genius, the martyr. But when you stop talking, you cut the script. The play ends. Suddenly they have no lines, no role, and no control. That's when they start scrambling. They get louder, more dramatic. They lash out. Why? Because your silence doesn't just withhold attention, it exposes something deeper: their emptiness. Seneca said it best: he who does not know how to be silent does not know how to speak. And this is where silence becomes your strongest weapon. Because until you've mastered restraint, your words hold no weight. You can speak truth, reason, or even wisdom. But if your emotions are loud, no one hears the message. That's why silence isn't weakness. It's emotional intelligence in motion. Let's ground this in reality. Imagine you're sitting at a family dinner. The usual crowd, the usual energy. Then comes that uncle, the one who always makes you the punchline. He leans back, smirks, and says loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still single." Maybe you're just too picky for your own good. Laughter breaks out. All eyes turn to you, waiting, watching. The spotlight is on. You feel it, that heat rising in your chest, that familiar urge to clap back, the old version of you. You might have fired off a sarcastic comment, maybe stormed out, or worse, started justifying your entire life for the 100th time, trying to explain something that doesn't need defending, but not this time. This version of you. You take a sip of your drink, you smile, not a bitter, passive-aggressive smirk, but a calm, peaceful smile, and you say, nothing. You let the comment hang in the air, exposed for what it is, empty noise. You stay composed, you stay present, and in that moment, without saying a single word, you own the room. That's not suppression, that's domination without aggression, that's mental toughness, that's spiritual clarity. That's the quiet energy of someone who's done shrinking just to make others comfortable. Here's why silence unnerves people like that. They rely on your reaction to validate their behavior. When the bait doesn't work, when you don't flinch, when you don't explain or justify, suddenly they're left with something they've spent years avoiding, their own unresolved noise. Because silence forces self-reflection, and those who can't face who they are will always try to drag a reaction out of you. But you're not here to be part of the noise. You're here to be clarity, stillness, discipline, power. Let's make one thing clear. Silence doesn't mean you're avoiding the issue. It means you're refusing to feed it. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to meet them where they are, because you've risen above that level. Let the undisciplined shout. Let the empty provoke. Let the insecure argue. A wise man watches. A strong one waits. And you remain silent, not out of fear, but out of training. Not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you've mastered peace. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. Here's the paradox: the calmer you become, the more chaotic they get. At first, your silence confuses them, then it irritates them, and eventually it terrifies them. Why? Because toxic people don't fear confrontation. They crave it. What they fear is irrelevance. And when you stop reacting, stop engaging, stop explaining, they begin to realize the one thing they never expected: they no longer control you. So what happens when you go? Still think of toxic people like fire. They burn bright, loud, and fast. But fire needs oxygen. And in this case, your anger is oxygen. Your guilt is oxygen. Your need to be understood. More oxygen. But when you stop feeding the flames, the fire flickers. And in that flicker, something unsettling happens. They feel it, the grip slipping. And because they sense their control fading, they escalate. And so they do the only thing left: they turn up the volume. They say crueler things, sharper words. They twist the story harder than ever before. They dig through your past, pull out old wounds, and fling them back into the present like weapons. They don't care if it's something you've healed from, something you've tried to bury, or something you love deeply. They'll target it. Not because they hate you, but because they're desperate, because they're losing control, and they know it. That's why they panic. That's why they get louder, because without your pain, they have no grip. Without your reaction, they lose their identity. And deep down, they know without your emotional engagement, they are nothing. Let's make it real. Think of someone who once held emotional power over you: an ex, a parent, a close friend. Every time they messaged you or called, you'd spiral, maybe into anger, maybe guilt, maybe confusion. One word from them could ruin your entire day. But then one day, you don't respond. No explanation, no apology, no carefully written paragraph to smooth things over. Just silence, just space, just peace. And suddenly they start to unravel. They double text, they leave voicemails, they guilt trip. You've changed. You're acting brand new. I guess you don't care anymore. But they're not checking in because they miss you. They're checking your boundaries. They're testing your silence. They want to know, is this peace real or is it just temporary? And this is the point where most people crack. Because when chaos knocks, it sounds a lot like connection. When someone fights for your attention, it's easy to confuse it for love. But don't fall for it. The Stoics understood just because it's loud doesn't mean it's love. Just because someone's yelling doesn't mean they care. They knew the storm always gets louder right before it dies. Now here's the deeper truth. The person trying to get a rise out of you isn't even talking to you anymore. Not really. They're arguing with a version of you that no longer exists, the one who needed constant validation, the one who feared rejection, the one who overexplained just to keep things calm. But that version is gone. Now they're faced with stillness, with someone who doesn't flinch. And that stillness, it reflects everything they've been running from: insecurity, emptiness, weakness. When you no longer serve as their emotional punching bag, they're left alone with their own instability. And they hate that, because now they're forced to face what they've spent a lifetime avoiding. Here's the real takeaway. Toxic people aren't afraid of your anger, they feed on it. What they fear is your detachment, your indifference. The moment you stop needing to be understood, the moment you stop responding, they realize they have no more power. Because once you've built a mindset rooted in peace, resilience, and discipline, they can't reach you anymore. You're out of emotional range. Let them shout. Let them twist stories. Let them burn themselves out. Your only job: stay calm, stay grounded, stay gone. Because the moment you become unshakable, they feel the collapse. They realize the game, the performance is over. And that right there is when you win. Not through revenge, not through words, but through silence. You see, toxic people aren't performers by accident. They're performers by design. They script drama like it's theater. They rehearse guilt trips like monologues. They live for tension. They need the scene. But here's the secret: no one tells you they can't perform without an audience. And the moment you stop clapping, when you stop watching, stop reacting, the curtain falls. The drama ends, not because they stop performing, but because you stop giving them a stage. Now picture this: someone in your life, always the center of attention at every family gathering. They speak over others. They dominate the mood. They always find a way to make the conversation orbit around them. They make backhanded comments during meetings. They stir up tension between people, then play the victim when called out. They thrive in chaos. They need noise. And most of all, they need you, your attention, your energy, your emotional reaction. It doesn't matter if it's praise or pushback, as long as they're the center of it. Because that attention, even if it's negative, validates their role. It tells them, I still have power here. But what happens when you don't play your part? What if mid-scene you simply walked away? What if you didn't raise your voice? Didn't bite the bait? Didn't let them pull you in? What if you stayed calm, composed, unmoved? They stumble. They stall. They start looking around for someone else to react, because the illusion of control only worked when you gave them something to feed on. Their power was never in the words they said, it was in how much of yourself you gave away in response. A man who provokes you owns you. That's what the Stoics believed. And the antidote to that kind of control, it's not confrontation, it's absence. Your emotional energy is currency. Your attention is not neutral, it's valuable. And toxic people, they're emotional thieves. They know exactly how to push just enough buttons to make you spend your energy on them. But here's the thing: they don't want solutions. They don't want peace. What they want is a stage, a spotlight, an audience. And they want you front row, clapping and reacting. But the moment you realize not everyone deserves front row access to your life, everything changes. You begin to curate your peace like a CEO protects their calendar. You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You stop dancing for their approval, because the performance is over. And what's left after that? Stillness, clarity, control. Let's bring it into the real world. Imagine this: you're texting with someone who constantly pushes your emotional buttons. They ignore you for days, then suddenly send a vague message like, wow, didn't expect you to act like this. The old you wouldn't. The old you would panic. You'd send long paragraphs trying to fix it, trying to be understood. You'd spiral. But the new you don't respond. Not out of spite, but out of principle. You recognize the bait, you see the setup, and you choose silence. Not ghosting, not cruelty, emotional detachment with intention. And that right there is one of the most powerful things you'll ever master. Because toxic people crave drama to feel important. They bait you with guilt. They manipulate with silence. They test your limits with passive-aggressive jabs. But you've left the theater. You're no longer sitting in the audience watching their emotional performance play out. You've walked off the stage. And now let them act for someone else, because your piece is not a prop. Your life is not a scene. Your mind is not their set. In the Stoic world, power doesn't need to be loud. Power is quiet refusal. It's the silent exit from a performance you never asked to be cast in. And when the curtain falls, you're already gone. But here's the truth. No one likes to admit you can block their number. Delete every photo, move across the country. But if they still live in your mind, they still win. Because it was never just about physical distance. It was always about emotional access. You don't truly cut off a toxic person by walking away. You cut them off by walking free inside yourself. The real battleground. It's not out there. It's in here, the mind. You've probably heard this before, or maybe even said it yourself. I haven't talked to them in months, but I still can't stop thinking about what they said. You blocked them, you walked away. But deep down, a part of you still wonders, was I the problem? That's not freedom. That's mental captivity. Because here's the truth, they don't need to be in your life to control you. They just need to rent space in your mind. And most people, they keep paying the rent month after month, memory after memory. But Stoicism teaches something far more radical. True freedom isn't just about removing conflict from your life. It's about removing slavery from your thoughts. Real liberation starts inside. Let's break it down with something real. You finally go no contact with someone who emotionally drained you for years. No more texting, no more arguments, no more passive-aggressive games. It's quiet now, peaceful, at least on the surface. But inside you start replaying old conversations. You second-guess every decision. You wonder if you were too harsh, if you misjudged, if maybe you could have saved it. You feel guilt even though you were the one hurt. What's happening? You didn't cut the attachment. You cut the access, but the bond, the emotional loop is still alive. You're still waiting for a resolution, still hoping for an apology, still trying to win approval from someone who made a habit of misunderstanding you. But here's the hard truth they already know. They know what they did. They just don't care. And the moment you truly accept that, not intellectually but emotionally, you take back every ounce of power they ever held over you. Letting go doesn't mean losing. That's a myth. People fear detachment because they think it means surrender, weakness, giving up. But Stoics don't let go to lose. They let go to win. Detachment isn't cold. It's clear. It's the decision to stop chasing closure from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need one last conversation. You don't need one more explanation. You don't need them to finally see your worth. What you need is peace. What you deserve is a self-worth that doesn't hinge on someone else's recognition. And you need the emotional discipline to say, I am no longer available for this cycle. Because here's the real takeaway, cutting someone off is easy. Cutting off the replay in your mind, that's the real work. The obsessive overthinking, the guilt, the endless what-ifs. That's the battle worth winning. True detachment is when you no longer need their reaction to validate your peace. When they become just a chapter, not the whole book. When their name doesn't spark emotion, but quiet indifference. That's when you know you're free. To be free is to no longer be haunted. And the moment you cut the invisible string, not with hate, not with revenge, but with clarity and self-respect, that's the moment you truly walk away. So why do toxic people still hold power over you? It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they're stronger. And it's definitely not because they're right. It's because some part of you is still craving their approval. You want them to acknowledge your goodness, to admit they were wrong, to recognize how much you gave, to say you didn't deserve that. But here's a truth that most people avoid. You don't need their approval, you need your own respect. That's the root of manipulation. That's the root of emotional dependency. Toxic people don't manipulate you with logic. They don't use facts. They manipulate you through your hope, your emotional longing to be seen, validated, redeemed. They sense your insecurities like radar. And once they find them, they aim right there. They dangle their approval like a shiny prize just within reach. But the moment you don't conform, the moment you don't play their game, they yank it away. Not out of confusion, not because they misunderstood you, but because they know exactly what keeps you hooked. They use silence to make you anxious, sarcasm to cut you down, guilt to keep you in line. Why? Because it works. Because deep down, part of you still believes, if I just try a little harder, they'll finally see my worth. They'll finally treat me right. But that belief, it's not love, it's control. And as long as you keep chasing their validation, You're putting your self-worth on clearance. You're marking it down for someone who never deserved to hold it. So here's your real-life moment. Think back to the last time someone hurt you. Not physically, emotionally. They crossed a line. You knew they crossed it. You knew you didn't deserve it. But instead of walking away, what did you do? You explained. You pleaded. You waited for maybe for a let's talk, for a shred of compassion that never came. Why? Because some part of you believed that if they would just approve of you again, if they would just say you were enough, then you could feel okay. That was the fix. The high, the false resolution. But here's the Stoic reality. No one can hand you your self-worth. It cannot be borrowed. It must be built. Their approval is not peace. It's a drug, short-lived, unstable, and dangerously addictive. So what does self-respect really look like? It's not loud. It doesn't post about itself. It doesn't demand applause. It moves quietly but with force. It's walking away without needing to slam the door. It's choosing not to reply to that manipulative message, not because you're angry, but because you're done. It's knowing with certainty that you don't need to be understood by people who refuse to understand you. And once that truth lands inside you, something shifts. You stop begging for closure. You stop trying to prove your side. You stop shrinking just to keep a broken connection alive. You stop trading your peace for someone else's comfort. The Stoics offered a different path, one that doesn't require approval to feel secure. They didn't chase recognition. They didn't live for applause. They anchored themselves to virtue, not validation. Marcus Aurelius said it best: ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Approval, it's fleeting. It can be given and taken. But self-respect, that's built on the inside. It's not negotiable. It's not up for sale. And that's what you cultivate when you hold your boundary, even when it's hard, even when you feel alone. When you choose silence over an argument that goes nowhere. When you walk away with your dignity intact. Because here's the most powerful truth of all: no one can take that from you. So here's your final takeaway. You don't need them to say you're enough. You need to believe it before they ever do, and especially if they never will. You don't need their attention. You need to stop giving them the power to determine your worth. You don't need to prove your value to anyone who couldn't see it in the first place. You don't need their applause. You need to stop performing, because the moment you choose self-respect over approval, you stop being controlled. You stop being manipulated. You stop being owned by people who never knew your value in the first place. And finally, you begin to live not for their validation, but for your freedom. You become whole again, not because they finally gave you the apology, the recognition, or the validation you once craved, but because you gave it to yourself. You stopped waiting for the people who hurt you to heal you, and that changed everything. Let's be honest, you weren't just annoyed. You weren't just misunderstood. You were hurt, deeply, wounded by someone who knew exactly where to strike and chose to do it anyway. Maybe it was betrayal. Maybe it was manipulation. Maybe it was the slow daily erosion of your self-worth, all by someone who claimed to care. Whatever it was, you're still carrying the scar. But here's the question that flips the entire story. What are you going to do with it? Pain, when used right, is a tool, a forge, a mirror. But most people, they get stuck in one of two loops. They either bury it, pretending it never happened, or they live inside it, reliving it over and over, waiting for closure that will never come. But Stoicism offers something different, something stronger. Transformation. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote that. And it's not just a quote, it's a roadmap. You don't avoid the pain. You turn toward it. You face it. You study it. You learn its shape, its rhythm, its purpose, and then you use it. Not to destroy yourself, but to sharpen yourself. That's where the power of constructive rage comes in. Because yes, there is a kind of rage that destroys, that eats you from the inside out, fueled by bitterness and revenge. But there's another kind, the kind that rebuilds, the kind that burns clean, the kind that clarifies your purpose. When you channel pain through anger, it poisons you. But when you channel it through clarity, discipline, and direction, it becomes fuel. You don't scream for validation. You build in silence. You don't argue to prove your worth. You prove it through your results, through your growth, through your quiet mastery. You take every ounce of rejection, every ounce of shame, every moment of being overlooked, and you convert it. That's not denial. That's emotional alchemy. Let's make it real. You were in a relationship where your worth was constantly questioned. You felt like love had to be earned, like your best was never quite enough. So you broke. You begged. You tried harder. And still, they left you feeling empty. But now you train. You heal. You rise. You build a life that's so full, so peaceful, so purposeful that they're no longer the headline. They're just a footnote, a side note in a much bigger, brighter story. You stop living in reaction. You start living in rebirth. And no, it's not to prove them wrong. It's to prove to yourself that they never had the final say in who you'd become. Pain, it's going to visit all of us. That's not optional. But what it makes of you, that's the part you control. Toxic people want your pain to define you. They want you stuck, doubting, small, unfinished. They want your story to end right where they left you. But when you use that pain as fire to forge discipline, to build clarity, to strengthen your spirit, you become something far more dangerous than bitter. You become untouchable. You can look at them now, calm, steady, stronger than you've ever been, and say, I survived you. I grew from what you tried to break. And now I am someone you'll never be able to touch again. Here's the truth, the pain they caused you. It's not your shame. It's not your weakness. It's your source code. It's the origin story of the strongest version of you. It's the proof you didn't quit. The evidence that you kept going. It's not the end of you. It's the beginning of your higher self. So don't run from it. Don't bury it. Don't drown in it. Use it. Let it shape you. Let it raise your standards. Let it sharpen your silence, the kind of silence that echoes so loud it sounds like success. Because your best revenge, it was never a dramatic comeback. It was never a heated argument. It was never a breakdown posted online. Your best revenge was and always will be your evolution. In the end, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No comeback, no emotional outburst, no lengthy explanations. No need to defend, justify, or convince. Just calm, stillness, silence. Because the moment you stop reacting, you stop handing over the very thing toxic people crave most: control. Power isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout. Most people think power looks like dominance: the louder voice, the sharper comeback, the stronger reaction. But real power, Stoic power, it's still, it's deliberate, it's unfazed, it watches, it waits, it holds the line, and it doesn't move. Epictetus once said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, no one can shake you unless you let them. No one can pull you into chaos unless you agree to enter the storm. And when you understand that on a deep level, you become unreachable. Here's what mastery looks like in the real world. You get a text full of blame, guilt, and manipulation. The old you'd panic. You'd start typing paragraphs. You'd cry. You'd try to defend yourself, to be understood, to fix it. But the new you pause. You see the trap. You don't respond. Not out of spite, but because you've outgrown the version of you that used to live in that conversation. That's not avoidance. That's non-reaction. And it's not weakness. It's conscious mastery. It's spiritual strength. Let's be clear, non-reaction doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're in control. It means you've trained your nervous system to stay calm. You've studied your own triggers. You've rebuilt your identity, not to numb your emotions, but to stop being enslaved by them. It's a deeper kind of discipline, the kind that turns chaos into clarity, that takes power back without making noise. It's the voice inside you that calmly whispers, I don't need to win. I just need to stay free. And now for the final lesson 1. The Stoics knew well, toxic people don't disappear because you fight them. They disappear when they realize they can't reach you anymore. That moment doesn't come from revenge. It doesn't come from anger or dramatic proof. It comes from the quietest move of all: non-reaction. The choice to not answer the insult. The decision to stay silent in the storm. The refusal to make your peace negotiable. Because the second you stop reacting, you stop bleeding power. You stop playing their game. You stop being their puppet. And that is when you become dangerous in the best way. You rise. When you stop reacting, when you rise above the noise, when you choose stillness over struggle, you begin to thrive. You stay calm. And just like that, they fade into background static. Because the smartest way to deal with toxic people, it was never about beating them at their own game. It was never about revenge, confrontation, or some grand moment of proving your worth to someone who never even recognized it in the first place. The smartest way is becoming someone they can no longer touch. Not because you blocked them, not because you burned bridges, but because you built something stronger, a fortress within yourself. A place no one can enter without your permission. A peace no one can disrupt unless you let them. You didn't destroy them. You didn't need to. You simply chose not to let them live rent-free in your head. And in doing so, you became something rare, something unshakable. Someone who no longer reacts because you finally remembered who you are. Let them perform. Let them twist the story. Let them shout into the void, spinning their narratives, hoping to provoke a response. But you're gone mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And in that absence, they lose everything. Because a fire can only keep burning if you keep feeding it. When you go silent, not from bitterness, but from strength, the flame dies. The game ends. And now that you've felt this shift, if this message landed with you, if even a part of you felt seen, empowered, or challenged, then know this is just the beginning of your transformation. So leave a comment below. Tell us what's one toxic situation you're finally ready to stop reacting to. Share it not just for yourself, but to inspire someone else who's still finding their strength. And if you're serious about growing into the strongest, calmest, most grounded version of yourself from the inside out, then subscribe to Stoic Living. Tap the notification bell because peace isn't just a feeling, it's a mindset. And every week we sharpen that mindset together. Just remember, you don't win by reacting. You win by rising.